Nate, Miles Morales, the game, the legend, the myth, the mythos. It's coming to PlayStation 5. And if you don't have a PlayStation 5, you're not going to be alive. That's their new tagline. Sony's hunting you down. No, basically,
I better buy one now.
if you don't have a PlayStation 5, this game is not going to be accessible from what we've seen so far. It seems
this is not for you.
Going to be on the PS4 or anything like that. But we did want to actually take a look at this game because this is one of the bigger superhero games people are excited for, other than whatever the Batman thing is that WB is working on and refuses to show us.
And whatever the Google Stadia exclusive is.
That's very true. Thank you so much for that, all two of them.
Yep.
So before we jump into this, though, I do want to do a little shout out to our own secondary channel, Degenerate Plays. This is our Let's Play channel where we play through all kinds of fun stuff. We have a good time. I think we've got a clip. Roll it. If your teacher, what if your teacher changed their identity so their name was like Mr. McCocketer?
Mr. McCocketer?
Yeah.
Or Mr. Dover? Mr. Ben Dover.
Yeah, what's your name? Ben, please, are we looking for a Ben Dover here?
Mrs. Tickles. Mrs. Tess Tickles. And probably don't need the crank.
I don't know what the crank is for. Oh, no, we already used it.
Yeah.
It's Christmas with the Crank. That's what that movie was, right? Tim Allen movie? Christmas with the Crank?
Christmas with the crank, dude.
Tetchy, you were too busy making jokes about...
Yeah. It's a good joke.
Did he make those noises during fornication?
I hope so.
Okay.
I'm sure everyone would appreciate it.
Okay.
I know, I certainly would.
I would
very
too.
cool. Actually, matter of fact, I might start. See what my wife thinks.
You should try. You should do that sometime. When you're at the end.
Yeah. It feels like a crime against humanity.
It does, doesn't it?
Well, let's see what happens.
We're back from the clip. So that's what you're missing out on right there. You better check that out because, oh my gosh, get it before it's gone. It's actually staying around. Regardless, let's talk about Miles Morales. Now that I've got my self-congratulatory
Yeah, do you feel better about
pat
yourself
on the back
now?
right away. That's what I'm doing right now, patting myself on the back.
Are you sure that's all you're doing?
Yes.
Okay.
So, what are 5 things that we want to see happen in this game? Nate the Great.
Well, I think the biggest thing I want to see in the game is not just random obligatory Spider-Man villains. I would actually like to see villains that are centered around Miles.
I like how you jumped down to like entry 3 or 4 on the list.
Well, this is the one I wanted to talk about.
No, that's okay.
Can I not talk about this?
Nope, I'm fine with it. I'm totally fine with it.
Okay.
You've made an executive decision. I'm rolling with it.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for trusting in me.
So who do you want to see?
So, characters like Prowler.
Yeah.
So, Prowler is Miles' uncle, actually.
Yeah, in a lot of interpretations, especially in the Spider-Verse, which I think that's going to be the big one a lot of people go into this game knowing.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to argue most of the people playing the Spider-Man games have not read the comics. I'm sure a bunch have.
Yeah.
But a lot of them have probably just seen the movies, and Miles really made it big into the Spider-Verse.
Right. And I think it would be cool, instead of just randomly throwing in, Green Goblin, for example, or Shocker.
Right.
Or just, villains that have nothing to do with Miles. I think it'd be cooler to have villains that are more specific to Miles. Maybe go in the comics, and if there is a character that was introduced with Miles Morales, I can't even think of one off the top of my head, maybe have him be one of the main villains.
Yeah, there are others. I think that you could easily pull from the Miles Morales villains gallery and sort of make some of them matter more, and from the larger Marvel universe too.
Yeah.
I mean, Taskmaster was brought into the base Marvel Spider-Man game, and he's never really been a specific Spider-Man villain. He was just brought in from the Marvel universe.
Right.
So I think you could bring in not just the stereotypical villain like Rogues Gallery, like you said. You could bring in people connected to Miles and people connected to the larger universe that aren't necessarily the big 5 we see. I mean, who do we always see in these Spider-Man stories? We see Doc Ock, Venom, Green Goblin, the other Green Goblin, Hobgoblin.
Yep.
Carnage, Scorpion. Yeah.
And they're all cool.
No, they're great. Yeah, but we just don't need to see them 300 times.
Exactly.
Especially in a game right after we saw most of those characters.
Right.
So the next thing I definitely want to see is Miles Morales-centered combat. I want this to be different from Peter's, but still feel like Spider-Man. And when I say that, we do actually see him use his Venom Blast a little bit in one of the trailers. It's really just you don't really see gameplay of it, really. maybe like a flash. It's more just a cutscene of seeing it, of test footage. So we don't really fully know how this is going to work yet, but we do know that the Venom Blast and his ability to stun or incapacitate enemies, at least briefly, will be in the game in some way. I want to see other gadgets that are specific to Miles, however you want to do that. Like, maybe types of webbing that are more based around how he thinks, because you even see in the original Marvel Spider-Man game, when he's talking to Peter, he talks about some things that Peter says, oh, that's a good idea. I wouldn't have thought of that. You know, there are gadgets and things that he kind of is thinking about that are different from the way Peter thinks.
Yeah, you would just like to see some things that are specific towards Miles.
Yeah, because this shouldn't just be a Peter Parker game reskin.
You don't just want like the web bombs.
No, you can
and
have
like the
some
Spider
of that.
Bros and just the generic Spider-Man
Right.
gadgets.
I do think you should have some of those still, because if he's working with Peter or working under Peter after this, it makes sense that he would be using some of those things.
Yeah.
But if you just cloned the gadget wheel from the original Spider-Man and dropped it into this, that would come off really lazy to me in terms of the gameplay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think even some of his movements should be specific to Miles. I mean, maybe he dodges things a little differently than Peter. These shouldn't all just be animations and gadgets ripped from the original game.
Yeah, maybe his movements, maybe his jumping is different, or his fighting style, or
Yeah, I mean, they should all
like
be
the way he
stylized.
throws punches and all that stuff would be different.
Yeah, because he's a different person. I mean,
Right.
it wouldn't really make sense for him to just be, oh, look, we threw Miles Morales as a layer over Peter
Like a
Parker.
skin.
Wow. Yeah, that would come off really disingenuous and
character.
fake, especially when they push, like, how much they care about Miles, if that's all they did.
Right.
So I'm sure they'll do this, but it's definitely something we want to see. Also, new locations, please. I am tired of the same map. It is a great map.
Yep.
Fantastic. But they didn't really even add in many locations at all in the DLC. In the City That Never Sleeps, people thought, oh, maybe they'll add in more of Queens or maybe more of these other areas that you see outside of the main part of New York that we're in.
Nope.
Nope.
Why would you think that? Why?
And it would have been a lot of work.
Yeah,
But it would have been nice to
but-
see. Like, it just really kind of was a lazy map for the DLC. The
Yeah.
fact that they didn't add any other areas really to it.
Yeah, and especially with a new game coming out, it
Yeah.
would be even lazier
Yeah.
if they just were like, here's the New York map, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it should be in New York, but there's so much more to New York than what we saw.
Right.
New York is massive. It's huge. It has so many different boroughs, and we only saw a few of them. So it doesn't really make sense to not go in that direction, I don't think either. I hope the problems that I had with the base Spider-Man game getting its bigger story-based DLC are not present here.
Yeah.
Because they already said this is not Marvel Spider-Man 2. This is a sequel with Miles, but it's smaller than the original.
Yeah.
They've already clarified that. So my point is the DLC was sort of in that same boat of adding hours and hours of gameplay, but being smaller than the original. I don't want to see this have the same problems that had, and I think those locations were probably a big one.
Yeah. You just don't want this to be another DLC.
Yeah, I don't really. No. And they've stressed it's not, because if it was, they could have just easily released this on PS4.
Yep.
So this would be really a big cash in and waste of time.
And it'd be very disappointing too.
Yeah. Also, costumes. We've talked about a few of these in a separate video, which we definitely will link in the description below, and I think I'll try to put it in the end screen as well. But a couple we talked about in that video I know were things like the end Miles Morales, where it's Mayor Miles Morales in his own timeline. We also talked about Spider-Verse. I think you brought that up. You wanted to see a very specific version of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think you need to have costumes that are specific towards him.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we talked about in the video already.
Yep.
It would just be really lazy if they're like, well, here's a generic Spider-Man costume.
Yeah, there are a few in the original that are not just Peter Parker, in terms of you have 2099 and a couple other ones, or Ben Reilly, sure, but a lot of those are characters very linked to Peter Parker.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't help Miles establish his own identity as a hero if we're just seeing something like, hey, the wrestler suit from the base game. It's for Miles now. You
Yeah,
just
this
kind
is
of
now
think,
Miles. Is it?
No, not really. I think that they need to establish this secondary identity to him, like whether they're going to basically move in his direction eventually as the main character, or if they just want to switch off between him and Peter You can't have it be Peter Parker and Peter Parker number 2.
Right.
That's
You need
really
to have,
lazy.
You need to have 2 separate characters.
Yeah, and I really want to see that. Costumes definitely play into that. So Nate, what is the final thing that we would like to see?
The final thing
Yes.
is new side missions.
Okay, I was hoping you weren't going to just go off script here entirely.
I can.
You're kind of a
if you want
maverick.
me
I
to.
was kind of afraid.
A maverick.
Yeah, you're a rebel without a cause.
Ooh. Well, we want new side missions or random events that are different than from the first one. Because let's be honest, a lot of those side missions from the first game, well, some of them were fun.
Yeah.
A lot of them were really boring.
Yes, they were.
And all the random events were really stupid.
They
And
mostly were,
really
yes.
repetitive and very dumb. Like, I don't know what else to say about it.
Well, yeah,
just
they're not creative.
No, it's like, oh, jump on the car, jump to the
Dodge.
side of the car, flip that guy out, jump to other side, flip, and it's just like, I've done this 40 times already.
Well, the worst thing is that in the DLC, they would have all these areas where it would be like, do 5 of those again in this area. And you had to do that in each area for a trophy.
Yeah.
And then they had that in the base game too, where you had to do a certain amount of crimes in each section of New York for a trophy. Yes, you can ignore that, but it is part of the completionist side of the game. And it didn't make sense to make that side of the game so boring.
Right.
There was no creativity to that aspect of it. And this is part of what I talked about in 5 things I thought the original Marvel Spider-Man did wrong. Was I thought that adding more types of random events and more liveliness to the city, like people just doing their own thing instead of just walking, because all you really see is people walking around at a few street vendors and some stuff in Central Park. It would have been more interesting to see NPCs just doing random stuff, and then also see more side missions and events that have creativity, like you said. This would make New York feel more alive than it does.
Yeah, and I think the side missions do a lot to that.
Yeah.
And when the events, and if you just have the same thing over and over again, it's really boring.
Yeah.
And eventually you get really tired of stopping a car.
Yep.
And, or, you know, like other stuff too. I mean, the collecting the backpacks was cool.
That's
because
actually
it was
one of
all
the coolest
It was all
things.
different stuff that you got
Yeah.
from it, though. So I think that's the reason why it was cool. Whereas all the other side missions were just stupid.
Well, and I will add to that too. I think that that would be a great thing to see in this game as well. I suppose it ties into the new mission types, is some sort of collectibles for Miles that play off of Miles' history.
Yeah.
Or who he is. I don't know how you do that because Peter was established. So you had him find these backpacks and they were things from his past, but maybe you find a way to have some kind of collectible that ties into Miles and the lore there and the story where you can actually talk about him and make it more centered on him and not just Peter Parker.
Right.
So there's a lot of things like that I think you could add into the game to make it feel more alive.
Yeah, I think my main concern is just please add events that aren't repetitive.
Yeah.
Like even if they're not the funnest thing in the world, at least it's just not repetitive.
Yeah.
And that was something that the first game really struggled with. Was, I mean, even like the Taskmaster missions were just repetitive.
Yeah. I really like them. I think they're one of the better side missions, but you're also picking out of a game that does not have the best side missions at all.
Right.
So.
Except for Screwball, that was very fun.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Very fun.
Well, enjoy the DLC then. Okay, so these are 5 different aspects or additional things that we want to see in a Miles Morales game that we think the game needs to make it really fleshed out and feel better and like a full experience. Let us know what you think in the description down below. What would you like to see in the game? What are your thoughts? And hey, how many different accounts are you subbing to the Let's Play channel on and letting those videos play to support your favorite creators here on Degenerate J? Is the number in the hundreds? If not, you're wrong. Have a fantastic day. Peace.